Hi, happy Bloomsday from Minneapolis, Minnesota, 2020. I am Elisabeth Workman, and I'm going to um, read from my very old copy of Ulysses. And I thought I would approach this um, in a bibliomantic way, so I asked the book how I should approach reading it, and randomly opened to page 235. Mr. Bloom, apologies for any aberrations in pronunciation or elocution in advance. Mr. Bloom turned over idly pages of the awful disclosures of Maria Monk, then of Aristotle's masterpiece, crooked, botched print, plates, infants cuddled in a ball in blood-red wounds like livers of slaughtered cows, lots of them like that at this moment all over the world, all butting with their skulls to get out of it, child born every minute somewhere, Mrs. Purefoy. He laid both books aside and glanced at the third, Tales of the Ghetto by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. That I had, he said, pushing it by. The shopman let 2 volumes fall on the counter. Them are 2 good ones, he said. Onions of his breath came across the counter out of his ruined mouth. He bent to make a bundle of the other books, hugged them against his unbuttoned waistcoat, and bore them off behind the dingy curtain. On O'Connell Bridge, many persons observed the grave deportment and gay apparel of Mr. Dennis J. Maggini, professor of dancing and C. Mr. Bloom, alone, looked at the titles. Fair Tyrants by James Love Birch. Know the kind that is. Had it? Yes. He opened it. Thought so. A woman's voice behind the dingy curtain. Listen. The man. No. She wouldn't like that much. Got her at once. He read the other title. Sweets of Sin. More in her line. Let us see. He read where his finger opened. All the dollar bills her husband gave her were spent in the stores on wondrous gowns and costliest frillies. For him. For Raoul. Yes, this, here, try. Her mouth glued on his in a luscious, voluptuous kiss while his hands felt for the opulent curves inside her déshabillé. Yes, take this, the end. You were late, he spoke hoarsely, eyeing her with a suspicious glare. The beautiful woman threw off her sable-trimmed wrap, displaying her queenly shoulders and heaving embonpoint. An imperceptible smile played round her perfect lips as she turned to him calmly. Mr. Bloom read again, The beautiful woman. Warmth showered gently over him, cowing his flesh. Flesh yielded amid rumpled clothes. Whites of his eyes swooning up, his nostrils arched themselves for prey. Melting breast ointments for him, for Raoul. Armpits oniony sweat. Fish gluey slime, her heaving embonpoint. Feel, press, crush, sulphur dung of lions. Young, young. An elderly female, no more young, left the building of the courts of chancery, king's bench, exchequer, and common pleas, having heard in the Lord Chancellor's court the case in lunacy of Potterton, in the Admiralty Division the summons ex parte motion of the owners of the Lady Cairns versus the owners of the bark Mona, in the Court of Appeal reservation of judgment in the case of Harvey versus the Ocean Accident and Guarantee Corporation. Phlegmy coughs shook the air of the bookshop, bulging out the dingy curtains. The shopman's uncombed gray head came out, and his unshaven, reddened face, coughing. He raked his throat rudely, spat phlegm on the floor. He put his boot on where he spat, wiping his sole along it, and bent, showing a raw-skinned crown, scantily haired. Mr. Bloom beheld it. Mastering his troubled breath, he said, I'll take this one. The shopman lifted his eyes, bleared with old rheum. Sweets of Sin, he said, tapping on it. That's a good one. And because the Bibliomantic results had their own sort of bibliomancy in them, and because I am speaking to you from— neighborhood of South Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered several blocks away, I thought I would pair Ulysses with Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, the same page number that I opened in there, that I opened to here. What is your name? I tried desperately, diving below the blackness until I was limp with fatigue. It was as though a vein had been opened and my energy siphoned away. I could only stare back mutely, but with an irritating burst of activity he gestured for another card and wrote, "Who are you?" Something inside me turned with a sluggish excitement. This phrasing of the question seemed to set off a series of weak and distant lights where the other had thrown a spark that failed. Who am I asked myself, but it was like trying to identify one particular cell that coursed through the torpid veins of my body. Maybe I was just this blackness and bewilderment and pain, but that seemed less like a suitable answer than something I'd read somewhere. The card was back again. What is your mother's name? Mother. Who was my mother? Mother, the one who screams when you suffer, but who? This was stupid. You always knew your mother's name. Who was it that screamed? Mother? But the scream came from the machine. A machine, my mother? Clearly, I was out of my head. He shot questions at me. Where were you born? Try to think of your name. I tried, thinking vainly of many names, but none seemed to fit, and yet it was as though I was somehow a part of all of them, had become submerged within them and lost. You must remember, the placard read, but it was useless. Each time I found myself back in the clinging white mist and my name just beyond my fingertips. I shook my head and watched him disappear for a moment and return with a companion, a short, scholarly-looking man who stared at me with a blank expression. I watched him produce a child's slate and a piece of chalk, writing upon it, "Who was your mother?" I looked at him, feeling a quick dislike, and thinking, half in amusement, I don't play the dozens. And how's your old lady today? Think. Say his name, George Floyd.